I was shooting every week for a whole of a year, at least one night in Berlin, and I think I got to know a lot of backyards and discovered a way of doing things, of seeing things. I think in this year I made a tremendous development artistically, because I was looking at my pictures and found out what's good, what's bad, what's interesting to me, and this kind of way I developed in this year. And in the years following, I was deepening that stuff, and here we are after a few exhibitions. And now I think I shouldn't talk too long, because Grant wants to say something as well, right?
Thank you, yeah. Markus and I obviously met online, and we admired each other's work for probably the best part of about 8 years on an old platform that some of you may know called Flickr. It's a horrible piece of social media, but it's a beautiful place to show your pictures online because they're full resolution. And I grew to love Markus's work over the years of knowing each other. Markus was one of the first people that when I moved to Berlin, I made sure that I met. In fact, I don't think I'd even moved to Berlin permanently and I'd met Markus. And it's been a start of a working relationship that I'm incredibly proud of. So I want to thank Markus for that, but I also would like to thank Marianne for inviting me to be in this exciting exhibition in this incredible place. I'm a visual artist. Most of my career has been in London and more recently in Berlin. I take pictures of flowers, and I only take pictures of flowers. And I've taken pictures of flowers for 10 years, and I have absolutely no desire to stop taking pictures and photograph anything else. We will see what happens, but my work is the floral work, so I take pictures of flowers, trees, the flora of Berlin, as I did in London. I am quite passionate about shared spaces, city spaces, parks, green spaces. Often the flora, I'm not a botanist, I don't know what I'm looking at a lot of the time, unless it's a rose, and then it's obvious as to what it is. They're collections in themselves. They're sort of museum collections without walls, or gardens for the gardenless, which is a quote which is much used in London to describe its city parks. And I really like that concept, gardens for the gardenless. I think it's brilliant when you live in apartments and have window boxes. And you know, you're Berliners, you see how the parks are used, these shared spaces. And for me, they're an absolute delight. I cycle around Berlin looking for parks and gardens. I don't have destinations that often, just see where I'm going. And so the original concept was called terra incognita, unknown land. It's from that historical perspective of parts of the map being left blank. And for me, life seems to be one terra incognita after another. And at the age of 50-something, throwing up a life in London and moving to Berlin was the most exciting thing I've ever done. When all my friends were thinking about retirement, I'm on my way somewhere else and starting all over again. So yes, I mean, I take pictures of trees and flowers that look like they're at night, but the night effect is not really the end game of my pictures. I want my photography to look staged. I'm interested in stagecraft. This is one of the reasons why we called the last exhibition that Markus and I were in together with Clara curated it for us, mise en scene. And it's that whole notion of the artificial stage. And cities are a bit like that, aren't they? They're stages, they're dramas, they're a theatre, and that's at the heart of my work. How do I make it? Okay. It's really simple. Well, for me it's really simple. I've done nothing else for the last 10 years, so it comes instinctively. What happens is I have a camera in one hand, which is a digital compact camera with a fixed lens, and I have a flash on a stick. And the two are connected on a hot shoe, And that's it. The settings on the aperture, the shutter, the ISO, the technical part of it, are nearly always the same. They never change. What changes is the available light, so that's what changes the pictures so dramatically. And I've learnt that rather than turning the power of the flash up and down, there's a much simpler way of doing this. Is that if there's too much light there, I just do that, or that, or that. And with the boom is just under 1 meter long, that means I've got all of that to play with. And that's a really nice little portable studio. And keep everything in one bag. It's as simple as that. The heaviest part of the bag is all the batteries.
And you make a post-production? Or?
No, I don't. I can't afford the program, the software a lot of the time. If I had a fixed income, maybe I would be using and post-processing. But I'm not prepared to spend money on anything that I can't afford in a few months' time. So my photographs are straight out of the camera. What I do is I crop them into a square on a laptop when I get them home. And some of the time when I'm looking at the back of my little camera, I can't see what it is that I've made. I'm listening for the audio from the digital focus. And then I know I've got a picture. And some of the time I've got a picture. Let's cycle home. Some of the time you must have all experienced this. You look at a picture and think, right, that's it. I'm on my way home. I want to see that now. And you get super excited. I can't pedal down the hill fast enough to get home. And then I realise that there's an aircraft flying through it, or a tower, or a crane. Because I don't process, I try not to have those elements in the picture, because that creates a dialogue. That creates almost a political dialogue in the pictures as well, and that's not what I'm after. What's been interesting for me is to take these sort of flora still lives, or Stillleben, and put them into a warehouse space, and then have all that architecture back around the flowers. That's exciting for me, very exciting.
But you take it in daylight.
They're all daylight pictures.
How it comes that it looks like an American night?
Well, American night is the answer to the question. American night was, for those of you who don't know, was a technique employed in cinema in the 1930s and 40s to make a scene look like night. The film stock wouldn't expose for low night. So what they had to do is underexpose the film and then relight it with studio lights. So when you see the cowboys riding off into the desert and you can see all the clouds really clearly in the middle of the night, that's day for night. There is an absolutely beautiful example of that technique made by the refugee filmmakers, Powell and Pressburg, in the United Kingdom during the Second World War period. And it's called A Matter of Life and Death. And A Matter of Life and Death is referenced in Wim Wenders' Himmel über Berlin, in the black and white and colour. And the use of that saturated technicolor and day for night is extraordinary in these 1940s feature films. And there's a German example that I could, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, the 1943 version with Hans Albers, day for night. That's what it is.
And how do you transfer it to your technique?
Just by basically underexposing. So technically, if it was a bright sunny day, I would be outside and my shutter speed would be about 1,000th of a second, ISO at 100, so film speed, comparable film speed at 100, and the aperture f11, f16, f22. So that means that the picture is going to be dark. But what that does is it gives me this fantastic depth of field. It not shortens it, it gives me everything virtually in focus, to play with. So I'm looking for clouds, I'm looking for overcast days. And once I use the flash, keep doing that. If I talk about flash, I keep having to do this. Berliners are very curious people, aren't they? And if you stand there in the middle of Tempelhoffeld with a flash on a stick, there's going to be quite a lot of people asking you what it is that you're doing. And they're not shy of telling you where you're going wrong. A city of 4 million people, a city of 4 million opinions. It's great. I love it. Get to meet a lot of them as well.
I'm quite the opposite of Grant in a few ways. Like I'm shooting at night and I'm not using a flashlight. Actually, you make it so easy to shoot with flashlight. If anybody had shot with flashlight, it's not that easy. Yeah? But maybe it's the experience. Yeah. And that is probably the same thing applying to night photography. Yeah? If you do it long enough or so, you can almost expose by guessing. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So I'm just always around with my tripod. I never leave without my tripod. And then when I find these scenes which I'm after, then I'm putting it there and expose usually something between 30 seconds, 1 minute, sometimes 2 minutes. And what I'm also doing is post-processing. That means when I'm coming home, I'm trying to enforce that light what's available there and that light situation, because there's always a mixed light when you are working in the city at night. There's cold light, warm light, and it mixes, and sometimes there's only rest light where almost no light at all, and it always is a little bit different. But what's common, what's almost every time the same is that it's a very soft light. So it's something you wouldn't experience in the daytime. In the daytime we have harsh contrasts usually, and even if it's a cloudy day, it's never as soft the light as you will find it at night when you expose for a very long time. So for instance, in this picture here, you see all these textures in the sand heap, and in the daytime you wouldn't even notice that. Yeah, that comes out in the night. And what I'm doing when I'm coming home with my pictures, then I'm looking at that, and I damp a little bit, I dim a little bit the lights, and I raise a little bit the dark parts, so that I have an equal spectrum and even softer light.
Yeah.
And well, a lot of people said that effect it creates is a little bit like cinematic. I mean, it looks a little bit like, sometimes people say it's like a painting, and I prefer the idea of being cinematic, because that's actually the original idea, how I started with this in mind. When I was very young, I wanted to be a filmmaker, yeah? And at the art school I did a few projects, and then I realized how complicated that is, you know, and how many people you have to deal with, and I don't like to deal with people. So I'm very happy at night when I'm working alone, and then I thought to myself, well, why not doing a movie in one frame? Yeah, just condense everything you want to do in one frame, and that's what I want to achieve here. Yeah, doing some little movies, yeah, and producing them in one single frame.
Do you come across other Berliners at night while you're out and about?
Sometimes, yeah, mostly people with dogs who watch out for these spaces.
Yeah.
And I'm scared of dogs. But luckily I never run into a real problem, yeah. Despite you have to climb over some fences sometimes. So, I mean...
I find that incredibly exciting, because I can, the parts are open, I can just walk in. You're scaling the wall to get into these places to make these pictures.
Yeah, but it's exciting, you know.
Yeah.
So you're standing there, and that's something you also do. I've heard from you. You're listening, yeah. Especially when you do long exposures for. Just imagine, yeah. You stand behind your camera and wait 30 seconds. 30 seconds can be a very long time at night, yeah? And there's nothing to distract you. You're just waiting for this image to appear, yeah? And then your senses get widened, yeah? You hear all kinds of noises and sounds, and I totally love this, you know, this
that's
background
magical moment,
sounds,
isn't it?
Yeah, whatever is around and things like that. Actually, I had in mind to do some installations, yeah, and taking not only the pictures but also the sounds and bring them in together with the pictures. Maybe I'm doing that in the future.
Be nice to see. For me, there are several elements that need to come into play, and this is why Marcus brings up the concept of sound. I'm standing still, and I'm standing still with a flash on the stick and a camera in one hand, and I'm standing like that for minutes at a time to make a photograph in 1,000th of a second. But what I'm doing is I'm listening, and I can listen to the movement or the susurration. It's a wonderful word, susurration. It's the noise that the wind makes as it goes through grass, or citharus, which is the noise of the wind through trees. Because I need something to lift my pictures so that they're not static. So I'm listening, I'm spending ages and ages and ages listening. And then I can hear that little gust come through the grass and preempt it. And that's when I make my picture. So listening is incredibly important to the whole process. And once, I'm sure Marcus will agree with this, once you're working in that way, you're in your own bubble. And that at my age is a really nice place to be. At long last, I can own that and say, yeah, I really like being on my own, doing what I do, rather than being distracted and fidgety. I'm more content when I'm making my pictures than at any other time in my life. And that for me is, it's been a hard-fought moment to reach there, but it's a fantastic place to be.
And Markus, which scenes you're looking for?
I think it's a little bit like stage scenes, yeah? Like, I'm looking for things which have been left by people in the daytime. For instance, they work in these places, and everybody, when they go home, they leave something there. There are machines, there are some things which haven't been taken away. And what I'm looking for is first of all, this situation in a kind of documentary way, yeah? See what people have left there, and then create a dialogue of these things. So, like, you almost create the living beings who did all this stuff, but you just see the remains of what they did. So almost some kind of archaeology, like, you know, you dig up these things, what happened in the daytime, and you see just the remains. And sometimes it's really interesting also to see these places in a matter of a few days, so coming back to the same place and see what have changed between these days and document that. But in general, really, I'm looking for scenes which are created within this frame. Yeah. So there's one thing on the left-hand side and one thing on the right-hand side, and they are in a kind of relationship. Maybe this is a good example there. This picture with this cannonball attacking the tower on the left-hand side, and the frightened elevator on the right-hand side. Yeah. This is exactly what I'm looking for. Maybe I can add one more thing, because before I came to study to Berlin, I was working in a theater for a while, and I always remember one specific time during the show when I was really happy, and that was at the end of the show when everybody has left, and then there was still the things on the stage, and the light was still directed on the stage, and you could feel the presence of these things which have been touched, removed. Yeah, people had done something with them, and for me, they have a kind of life of their own, and that's what I'm trying to recreate here.
So this is when you were at art college, you were working in a theatre?
No, it was before.
Before?
It was just after school and before I went to Berlin. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I do remember Marcus telling me that, but I was just trying to sort of piece it together, because, you know, we're a sum of parts, aren't we? You know, our life experiences, they all come to play in what we're doing now. And a very formative experience in my life was working in film. I was an animator for a company called TVC, Television Cartoons, and they're something in the UK. They made The Snowman and Father Christmas and When the Wind Blows. They're beautiful films, Oscar-winning films. And there was an exquisite draftsmanship that they brought into their animations. We brought into our animations, I was part of it. And that drawing is still a huge passion of mine. And the time spent drawing and thinking about light and colour, if you were to see some of my drawings, they're not such a million miles away from what I'm doing. They don't look anything like, the subject matter is completely different, but the approach is the same. Plays of light, plays of colour, that plays a huge part. So it's very theatrical too.
Yeah.
Very theatrical.
Yeah. That's also a feeling I have when I look at your pictures, that they always have this kind of theatrical background, and that they look a little bit like staged. And I remember one black and white picture you shot really impressed me very much. That was almost like a scene from a movie from the 60s, from the early 60s, in black and white, and it all recreated that feeling of that movie in my mind.
I think
looking at your picture.
The films of Akira Kurosawa are in black and white, and the technical crews who were working on those films in the 1960s and 70s are breathtaking. I could sit and watch those films without subtitles. I wouldn't have a clue what was going on. As long as it's got Toshiro Mifune in it, it was fine. It's just the stagecraft. They're so beautiful. Yeah, so crisp and lovely black and whites. It's really exciting to work in black and white for me as well. But mainly in colour. Mainly in colour.
And how you find your motifs? You're walking around, or you heard it, or it's...
In the beginning, yeah, I was just really like a flaneur walking through the city and just checking out things. And then later I realized that there are areas which are more dense with possible motifs, and other areas which are boring. I mean, I would never have found something in these areas. And then I was trying to figure out how to find these places more easily, and I was discovering Google Maps. So I was looking at cities. I mean, I was not only working in Berlin, and especially in other cities it's more difficult. In Berlin I know where things are, but in other cities not so much. So I was looking at Google Maps and checking from above where are certain areas. And I specifically found areas interesting where industrial places were bordering to housing places where people are living. And in these fringes, which go into each other, in these fringes I think I found the most interesting places. Yeah, there were things, you know, which created these places. So I'm looking at that and make a route and make some checkpoints almost, yeah. And I drive from one checkpoint to the next checkpoint. And funny thing is that most of the times in between you find the most interesting scenes at the end.
Yeah, that happens to me all the time. I set off to make a photograph somewhere and then stop en route, and that's the day's work. Back home to see it on the computer. I mean, the places that I like to go to are the places that you like to go to. They are the obvious places to go to, the parks and gardens of Berlin. I'm very lucky, I consider myself to be very lucky, that I live so close to Tempelhoferfeld, which is a breathtaking view in the middle of Berlin. One of the pictures in this exhibition, two of the pictures in this exhibition are made up on Tempelhoferfeld. But most of them are in places like Volkspark Hasenheide or Volkspark Friedrichshain. They're the same places that you go to. So I go back to the same locations again and again and again. I could tell you there's a little tree up in the wild space up on Tempelhoferfeld. I've been trying to photograph it for 2 years now and not really getting the picture that I want. I know that I'll get the picture that I want. There's a tree in this exhibition which was photographed in Volkspark Hasenheide. And the title of it is called An Authentic Occurrence of Circumstances. What a pretentious title. It's just magically. But it's a quote. It's a quote from the Canadian lens-based artist Jeff Wall. And he was quoting saying, you don't make, there's nothing lucky in photography. You make your own luck. And in his terminology, he called it an authentic occurrence of circumstances. So if you go out with your camera regularly enough, you will have lots of authentic occurrences of circumstances. I just think it's fantastic. The title's better than the picture. It's just great. Has and Hide is not without its challenges, because there's a large community of rough sleepers in the parks, and some of them, well, it's like all cross-sections of society. Some of them are very appreciative that you're there, and others don't want you there at all. Down to the individual. I do get shouted at by some people. I got shouted at by a woman who thought I was blinding the birds in the trees. So I called the photograph after her. Did her for blinder. I got really anxious when I got home. I thought, my God, am I killing birds in the trees? What's going on? I looked it up. No, they blink. It's okay. I mean, otherwise all these sort of wildlife photographers would be damaging birds irreparably every time they photograph them. All those blind hummingbirds that you see in museums and galleries. But I couldn't believe it. I mean, she came over and I thought, oh, it's going to be another one of these interesting, you're blinding birds in Berlin. Okay. Not that much you can say to that, really. It's sort of like, yeah, okay. A lot of people, if they come over to you, in the middle of the night, you may have a slightly different conversation. But they want to know what you're doing. I've already mentioned that they want to know what you're doing. But they don't really want to know what you're doing. They just want someone to talk to. And then before you know it, you're looking at pictures of their cat on the mobile phone, and 20 minutes have gone past, and there's the 300th picture of a cat looking out the window. But it's part of the pleasure of it. It's what happens when you're out and about. I like it some of the time. Some of the time I want to say, this is crazy. Maybe someone can answer this. I have had a few people, and we've discussed this before, who will walk over to you, even though you're not photographing them, to tell you not to photograph them. You're nowhere near them. You may be looking in the other direction. Did you photograph me? No, I don't photograph people. And then it's almost in saying I don't photograph people, you've insulted them further by not photographing them. Why am I not interesting enough for you to photograph me? So, that's when I go. The beauty of a bicycle is you can just get on your bike and scarper really quickly. They'll be gone in 10 minutes and you can come back and make your picture.
Yeah. I really miss out on these interactions.
I can imagine they would be somewhat different for you in the middle of the night.
It is different. I mean, sometimes you bump into people, and it's mostly guards, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And it's really funny because they are not the same, you know. They are some are very relaxed and easygoing, and even give you tips, you know. So I experienced that. I've been in a place which he should guard, yeah, and I was telling him about my attitude, what I want to do here and what I'm looking for, and then he was getting really excited about it and said to me, come on, I'll take you to this place in the back, there in this area, you will find something, yeah, and that's a perfect evening.
Yeah.
And sometimes people accidentally came into a frame, or I mean, I'm not only shooting at night, and it's interesting how people react on social media when they talk about this picture. And if you have, as soon as you have a person in a picture, people only talk about this person and the relationship of the person to the surrounding, the background, the context, yeah. And what's interesting to me is completely neglected. Nobody looks at that anymore because, I mean, we are social creatures, so we look at each other and we want to find out who's that guy, who's that woman, and we think about these guys, and then, you know, so it's completely lost if you have a person in the frame. The other thing is, usually people don't stand still for half a minute or even longer, so it doesn't make much sense for me.
There was one picture in this exhibition, it's not in this exhibition, which was in the previous exhibition that Markus and I mentioned it already, whereas a friend of ours, Meg, she was wandering through the picture and she didn't realise that she was in shot. But because of the length of the exposure, she didn't register on the sensor, which I think is really joyous.
Yeah, I told her she's the Japanese ghost in that picture. Yeah. And that's a wonderful idea, I think.
For me, all right, let's start again. As soon as there's everything that Markus has said and more, because for a lot of the time I worked in the National Gallery, and I was working with this is the National Gallery, Trafalgar Square in London. So there's an astonishing collection of Dutch 17th century landscape paintings, which are mathematically perfect, golden section, the rules of thirds. But the artists who painted them would employ somebody else to paint figures into the landscape, because the figures become where your eye goes to, which is what Markus has said. So exactly the same for me. If I was to have people in my pictures, we would look at the people, and that's not necessarily the subject, though of course there are two people involved in every photograph, aren't there? There's the person who makes the photograph and the person who looks at it. So that there's that sort of human interaction straight away. And for me, so that's people. Dogs, I quite like to get a dog. I get the occasional bee. I get excited about, oh, look at the bee. But when it comes to architecture, or the crane that I've already mentioned, it's that concept of visual dialoguing. Is everybody familiar with that term? Visual dialogues. It's really a museum term, but you get it a lot in exhibition design and display. So when you put two objects together, they start communicating. So if I put this bottle alongside the wire, they're having a visual dialogue. If I want to photograph a plastic bag in a tree, I would do so, but I'm spending most of my life trying to avoid the plastic bag, because it just creates a whole new concept. It politicizes the picture in a way which I'm not intending. I am quietly political. I think these green spaces are massively important, and they are under threat. And they are great sources of biodiversity in cities. And I think that's a really important thing, especially for the huge variety of bees that we have in cities. And I don't just mean hive bees, honeybees. I'm talking about wild individual lone bees. So it's something I've always been interested in, but I've decided that now that I no longer work in a museum and I'm not paid to know it all, I'm not going to know it all. I'm just going to take pictures of trees and just keep it as simple as that. It's all part of the thinking, of course it is. I can't switch off that unless I'm making the pictures, then I can switch everything off, which is a really nice place to be.
Do you have soundtrack in mind, or a soundtrack for these pictures?
Yeah, actually natural soundtracks, because they would need to be dramatically enhanced, because it's at night usually very low noise, very low sounds, but it's often a kind of a drone sound, yeah, because there are machines humming somewhere, or there's some rhythmic noise from the railway close by or something like that, and occasionally there's a bird, you know. I remember that was a really heavenly moment. I was in a Russian tank farm outside in the eastern part of Germany, and it was totally polluted, and I was constantly afraid that I move somewhere in some puddle and I will be gone, you know, because it really looked dangerous. and everything was really black and stuff. I mean, okay, it was black already because it was night. And then I found this space and took my picture, and in that very moment a nightingale started to sing. And I thought, no, you can't invent that, you know. So.
Authentic occurrence of circumstances.
Exactly,
you have to be
exactly,
there.
Yeah. But it's really difficult, you know, because you can't predict these things. And I mean, usually it would be some kind of rhythmic drone-like sound, which I would probably use, yeah.
But no music or no
No music, no. I think, I mean, that also, that goes in a direction which I try to avoid, because, I mean, music is always connected with feelings, and it gives you a direction of thinking, and I don't want to give people a direction of thinking. I'm intentionally trying to be ambiguous with the pictures. So I'm trying to find a balance so that not one of the 2 or 3 or 4 sides or so are too much enforced and make you think something specially, you know. So I'm trying to initiate some train of thoughts in the people who look at the pictures and find their own movie, and not dominate with
Some
an idea.
of the time on the way to different locations, I may listen to music while I'm sort of walking along, but as soon as I get to where once I've unpacked my kit and start using it, there's no music, there's no outside interference. And I think Markus is absolutely right that it creates an unintentional dialogue. Because if I was to tell you, don't tell anyone else this, but I had an earworm for Wagner, the entry of the gods into Valhalla, while I was making one of these pictures. It wouldn't go away for days. I kept messaging Markus and saying, I can't get this piece of music out of my head. And that really changes the picture when you... I tell you the picture, it's the summer storm over Tempelhoferfeld. Very Wagnerian. Yikes. It's not fair to Wagner.
Yeah, let's start with these 2 because they almost belong to each other. They are almost in the same place. That's north of the main train station in Berlin. And in the middle one, they were just building the new track of the S-Bahn towards the north. And this was the working ground. And if you would walk into this picture and then turn to the left, then you would end up here at this heap. Yeah, and I took both of these pictures at the same time. And that's that. And this picture, that's probably 5 years older. I took in the north of Marzahn, and I think it's some kind of place where they have waste disposal and process waste, yeah, and it was already in the middle of being destroyed or taken down, as you can see the various attempts, yeah. Maybe they try to demolish that, and I was there, I think 1.5 years later to see what happened with the ground, and then there was an Aldi-Parkplatz. So now there's Aldi there. So this was Aldi, yeah. So
thank you very much for your patience and turning up to listen to us. It's a real pleasure to see so many of you here tonight. Thank you once again to Marianne for getting us all together. It's a privilege to be in this exhibition with so many talented artists who are new to me. As I say, I live in a bubble. I haven't got a clue what's going on most of the time. I'm quite comfortable that way, but it's nice to have a little bit of tribalism and for everybody to get together. So thank you for coming in this evening. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.